Hi, I'm Jay.
And I'm Erin.
And I'm Torrey, and you're listening to episode 69 of the Salty Mother Clutchers podcast. Hi, I'm Torrey Peters. I ride a Yamaha FZ07, and I'm recently also added to it a AKT TT200 dual sport while I'm here in Columbia.
How long have you been riding?
I've been riding on and off since I was like 18, but I actually didn't get a license until, I don't know, probably I was like 35.
Okay. So you were just doing it
so
like...
I was an illegal rider.
Yeah.
I was an illegal rider for like, I don't know, whatever that is, like 17 years.
like more
but
than...
now I'm like a legit. Yeah.
Illegally riding
like
for longer than most people have been riding, and now you're legit.
Yeah.
So here's a question.
Now I'm legit. Now I'm like government sanctioned.
Woo!
So here's a question. Do you need a license in Colombia?
In Colombia, you don't need a license. You need like... It's like this whole funny thing where you need a card that says that your bike has been checked out by a mechanic and that it's safe. You need a proof of ownership that shows like you haven't like stolen it or something. And you need a very, very minimum insurance. Those are the three things you need to ride.
Okay.
Well, that's not bad.
They sort of say like you should, like for me, I'm not a Colombian citizen. So it's like I should have my passport as well to ride. But beyond that, I've never been asked for a license or anything.
So because people don't necessarily need a license or safety courses or anything like that there, like, do people ride like maniacs?
No, actually, I mean, yes and no. But there's like motorcycles here are like daily work machines. Like it's sort of the opposite from the US, where like, you have your cars and then you have the motorcycle for leisure. Like people use their bikes to get to work, to carry things around. They even sort of take the back axle off of a motorcycle and put like two wheels on it and make it into sort of like a cargo thing. So motorcycles are like, the motorcycle culture isn't really like, let's be daredevils because it's fun. It's sort of like, I'm trying to save on gas and get to work. And so there's like a whole kind of different way that people ride and a whole bunch of different like safety precautions because the roads are kind of messed up and there's not as many, at least where I am, as many like stoplights and things. So there's like a whole kind of culture of like beeping when you go through intersections and kind of taking care because it's just, there are so many motorcycles out and it's like the way to do traffic with them.
So in comparison to like, say the States or Canada or, where there's like a distinct motorcycle culture difference between like, say, sport bike people, cruiser people, racing people, and like, MCs and stuff. Is there any of that there as well? Or is it mostly just the commuter?
There's like, there's definitely like sort of people who have street bikes. So most of the bikes here are about like between 100 and 200 cc's. Like to have anything above 200 is really like you have a luxury bike, and there really aren't that many roads to take super, anything even above like a 300, like a Honda XRE 300 is like, that's what the police ride here. It's like what the army rides is a 300 single cylinder, because you just don't go that fast. There is like a little bit like, do you ride on the street or do you ride on like dirt roads and back trails? And a lot of that is less like a question of like culture and what you prefer than simply how much pavement is in your area.
Right.
So like in a place like Medellin or Bogota, people are riding street bikes because the roads are largely paved. Here in Santa Marta, people will ride these like Bajaj, which is an Indian bike. There's like a lot of Bajaj street bikes, or AKT makes a bike called an NKD, which is a 125 single cylinder that's like sort of looks like a retro Japanese bike. And those are street bikes. But really, if you go anywhere outside of that, you're riding like a Yamaha 150 dirt bike, like an XTZ 150, or you're riding like what I've got, like an AKT dual sport bike that's like a 200. And there's some Suzukis and some Hondas here, but it's really it's less like a kind of culture thing than it is a what's the right bike for the situation you have. That said, I was in Barranquilla, which is another city down the coast last weekend for Carnival, and there was some sort of Latin American motorcycle um, group that had come for Carnival, and so there was like hundreds of people with cruisers, which I'd never seen here before, and they'd come from like all over Latin America for Carnival. So there is, I guess, like a cruiser biker culture, but and they're wearing like the same biker stuff that you see anywhere else, like leather vests with patches and like
Right.
where you're from and what's your affiliation and stuff like that. But generally, it's like you buy the bike for the roads that you have.
Right. So like whereas around here you would buy a motorcycle and then there's immediately like a image that's pushed onto you of like being some sort of a quote unquote badass or whatever. And then
Yeah.
down there it's more like just chill.
It's like, it's like,
I
oh, you
prefer
have a
that.
Honda Civic, you know?
Yeah.
There's not a big statement when you have a motorcycle. It's like you need a reasonable form of transportation. I mean, I'm just learning. I'll say all this, like I've been on and off here like a year, and so I'm still like learning the kind of thing. And I do have, back in the States, like I have a naked sport bike, the Yamaha. So I have like familiarity with the more North American way of doing it, but I'm kind of digging motorcycles as a way of life here, because also like when you're on the roads, everybody's looking for motorcycles. Nobody's like,
Hmm.
what's the motorcycle doing out here? It's like that's the major form of transportation.
Oh, I love that. I love motorcycles making sense and not just being like
Yeah.
Yeah.
a bunch of posers trying to look cool. Like I'm just trying
No,
to
I
get
mean,
where I
it's-
gotta go, and I'm strapping what I need on this thing, and off I go. Right?
Yeah, like everybody here has got a top case. I know
Yeah.
that people are like, like in the States, it's like top cases are like uncool and they like mar the aesthetics to your bike. Well, no, like everybody here's got a top case because everybody here wants to carry stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and on one hand, I'm thinking like, there's no way a motorcycle podcast like ours would survive with, in that sort of a culture. But then I'm like, it's also very utilitarian, which
Yeah.
is very much, our style.
That's
I
our
guess.
style.
If we have a style, I guess that would be it.
Yeah. There's like a biker bar here in it's in Santa Marta. Like to be a biker is a motero here in Santa Marta, and like there is a biker bar, but it's not like you have like the sport bike people like separated from the street bike people, separated from the cruisers. It's sort of like it's just a place that actually has like a pretty good parking lot, so you can bring your bike there and
Nice.
have a drink. Like that, like the definition is really like good motorcycle parking at
Right.
this particular
Nice.
bar, rather than like and so that's I don't know, I appreciate it. And there's definitely people who like they'll put like a new exhaust on their bike because they want it to be like louder, or like lights are a big thing here. Like a lot of the 125 bikes come with like pretty bad stock lights, and so people will be like really like putting like 7,000 lumen LED headlights, because it's like that's like a check it, that's like bling,
Yeah.
So people do like, they definitely customize and have like a lot of pride in their customizations, but it doesn't fall along the same lines, I think, as North American motorcycle culture.
How did you choose that bike that you just bought?
So there's like two places from Santa Marta that you'd really want to go on a motorcycle that are like really cool. One is La Guajira, which is a desert. It's like at the very north part of Colombia, it's mostly like rainforests and mountains, but at the very north part of Colombia, it turns into desert, which is about 3 hours from me, and you can ride like entirely off road in the desert. There's like dunes, there's trails, there's like it's extremely sparsely populated. There's some like indigenous groups that live out there, but you can kind of like have really pretty amazing riding out there for which you really want a dirt bike of some sort. And then up the mountain from me, there's an area called Minca, which is mountain like rainforests, all dirt roads. So I knew I wanted a dirt bike, and I knew I wanted something that I could ride for like 3 hours fairly comfortably.
Mhm.
And I know that like 200 cc's doesn't sound very big, but 200 cc's is so much more comfortable than like 125 for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just like the buzziness of like a tiny
Yeah.
engine.
Yeah. It's a little
And
easier on the
so
head.
then I was looking at a Royal Enfield Royal Enfield just started importing bikes and assembling them here in Colombia. So I was looking at Royal Enfields, but they really stand out. Like they really like nobody. They're about twice as much as as all the other Colombian brand bikes, and they're pretty heavy. And most people just park on the curbs and stuff. And I just pictured trying to muscle out this like big, heavy, for here bike onto the curb and just kind of standing out. So the AKT is a Colombian brand of an engine that's assembled in Taiwan, and it's very, very common.
Mhm.
It's got 6 speeds, so you can go on like longer journeys with it somewhat comfortably. And it's a dual sport style. It looks sort of, like a very tiny Kawasaki KLR 650 or something like that, It's, street legal and everything. And so and also it's like half the price of any of the Japanese or like other brands, which for me is great because I can buy it. If I break it, it's no big deal. And everybody, since it's so cheap, everybody here has them, which means that there's like roadside repair everywhere you go.
Nice.
Like
Right.
there's always like in every little place there's some like, mechanic whose main work is AKT motorcycles.
It's like having a Sportster in the States.
Yeah, totally. It's like everybody knows how they work. Everybody's seen them before.
Yeah.
Everybody knows basically where to source parts.
Yeah.
There's nothing like no one's gonna like. You're not gonna come in with an AKT and someone's gonna scratch their head being like, "What is that?" They know.
So are you riding mostly alone down there? Are you taking passengers? Or are you finding people to ride with? Like, how are you finding it as far as hitting the road?
I ride with my partner Chris. She also rides. She has a KTM back in the US, and we share. I guess we've shared custody of the AKT. I guess.
Been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. The bike's name is like Il Penguino, which is like the penguin, or El Penguino, the penguin. Because the back seat is the passenger seat is pretty uncomfortable. So we went to like the local there's this chain store called Miniso, and we bought this flat stuffed animal penguin pillow. It's like made out of memory. But it's made out of memory foam, so it's like a really great solution. And we just sort of strapped the penguin pillow to the back seat, and that's really comfy. And so the bike is called the Penguin, and it's also black and white.
So not only is there customization culture there, you're really pioneering this customization culture.
It was actually someone else who told me. They were like, I was like, some little shop, and I was like, is there like something, because we got a top case with a little backrest on it, and we're like, is there something for the thing? And they were just like, oh, just go to Miniso. Everybody gets the memory, like it's the cheapest way to get memory foam is just these stuffed animals from Miniso. So it's like most people remove the penguin because like most people are like not down with having like a penguin stuffed animal on their bike, but we thought the penguin was cute and like funny, so we left the penguin
Oh, fuck yeah.
covering. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So
That's
I don't know
good.
if that answers. That is how I ride.
I mean, that's a good enough answer for me.
Yeah.
I accept this.
I would have 100% left it a penguin too.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
That's
without
funny.
question.
I saw the picture when you sent me the link to the website of like your bike, and I was like, that bike looks like a bird.
It does look like a
Yeah.
bird.
Yeah.
It does. It's very. There was a bear stuffed animal pillow and a Shiba Inu stuffed animal pillow, and we thought that really the penguin
Yeah.
was like the vibe.
Well,
The vibe of the
people
bike.
put like sheepskin and stuff and on their bikes. So like
Yeah.
it's just no different, right?
Yeah, it's the
You know,
same.
Yeah, totally.
It's just more,
Yeah.
conscious.
Yeah, it's just a little penguin hide. Artificial penguin hide.
I was like penguin leather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how's that for hauling two people?
I mean,
Tight?
mostly we're going pretty slow, so it's
Okay.
okay, and like, um, it's a lot of like on the hills, it's a lot of like first gear, but the roads are where I like to take it. Around the city, it's great. It's like really economical for gas. You never go more than like 30 miles an hour in the city anyway. And then once you're out in the countryside, the roads are like pretty gnarly, dirt road, mud. You cross streams and stuff like that. Like, it's really important to me to get one with a muffler that's raised, because you do
Mhm.
cross streams occasionally, and so you're never really going more than like 25 miles an hour most of the time, and you don't need. I mean, it's really taught me how like insane the engines in North America are. Like, there's so, like, even
Mhm.
my FC07 is 700 with like crazy torque, and it's like that much power. I actually don't think I need it. It
Mhm.
seemed like
Mhm.
700 seemed like a normal amount of power when I bought that bike, to do like highway stuff. And now I'm kind of like, I just got so used to having these huge, huge engines and just seeing what people do. Like, the cargo bikes here are carrying so much cargo, and they're 250s.
Mhm.
People just go around with and like 250 is actually like, I mean, if you think about like the horsepower on these bikes, like I think my bike is 16 horsepower, and that's like what bikes were in like the 60s and 70s. They weren't
Yeah.
like the kind of horsepowers that we get from these engines now. They're just outrageous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. We
Yeah.
talk about that a lot on here because we think like people just make excuses for like air quotes needing a bigger bike. And like we always joke about how we want to get a 250 Rebel and just like ride the fucking shit out of it like as
Yeah.
our regular bike just
Yeah.
to like prove to people that 250s can do a lot of shit.
It can do
Yeah.
most like 99% of
Yeah.
the type of riding you want to do. Like you can get that out of a bike that small.
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
not a problem.
And I think it's like, a lot of people want that buffer of acceleration where you're going like 70 and you want to be able to just like quickly go 90 to get out of trouble or something like that.
Yeah,
And
Mm.
I understand that, but for me, it's like, I'll just ride defensively and go like 65,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I've started like riding this AKT has really made me like look again at this Yamaha I have, which I'm just like, the kind of torque and like the kind of acceleration it has. It's just to get that feeling in your stomach of acceleration. It's not. There's no utility to it other than like, wow, my stomach dropped because I pulled on the throttle.
So what kind of riding do you like to do on the Yamaha? Like why do you have that bike and what kind of riding do you do with that when you're back home?
Okay, well, I should tell you kind of like my bike history, which is
Yes.
like how I ended up with this. So when I was 18, I bought my first motorcycle, and this is like when I didn't have a license.
Yeah.
I was at college, and I was like, I didn't have a car or anything, and my college is like outside of the city. It was like one of those isolated liberal arts colleges. So it's like I really want a motorcycle to like be able to just leave and go places. And I had about $600, and that was enough to. And eBay was like out, and so it was enough to buy a bike. I found a bike for 600 on eBay. It was like a 1980s shaft drive Yamaha, like one of those.
Oh fuck yeah.
I think it was like an XJ 600 or something like that. I think is what it was. But it was a 4-cylinder, And I found it on eBay and I saw it was like in this other city about like, I don't know, 40 miles away. And I said to the guy, I was like, can I just come pick it up? And I didn't tell him I didn't have a license, or I didn't tell him that I actually didn't know how to drive a motorcycle. And my friend had like a Suzuki GS 550, and he gave me like a little lesson in the parking lot. Like, here's how a clutch works. Like, here's how this stuff works. And I was just like stupid. I was like a total idiot at age 18. And I was like, well, I'm going to go buy this motorcycle. So I get to the motorcycle and it's owned by a cop. And I was
Oh,
like,
fuck.
fuck. And the cop was like, so you like have stuff for this? And uh, I was like, no, I just was gonna buy it and then like get things. And he was like, and you could see he was like, this, I want to get rid of this motorcycle. And here's like somebody who's gonna buy it like right now. But I also know that this is like a terrible idea. So he was like, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take your money. I'm gonna wheel the motorcycle to the end of my driveway off the property, and then I'm gonna turn around and go back inside and not look at what happens to you. And I was like, that seems good. Like, it's like the right, like a responsible thing for you to do, sir.
Yeah,
So
it sounds very police-ish.
yeah. So yeah, and it took me. The bike was it was basically okay. The bike it needed like a carb clean and some other stuff, but it got me home. And I remember like the first time I had to take it on the highway to get home, and I was pretty terrified. But yeah, I got home and then I had it like all through college, but it was like there was like one thing after another where I just like couldn't get a license, I couldn't get insurance, I couldn't get all these different things. And eventually that bike got like seized by the school because it was like in the parking lot and there was like it just like wasn't legit
Right.
with the whatever. And I was kind of like, the amount of money, it was $600 for the bike, and the amount of money that it would take in to like free the bike and like the kind of like conversations with like school officials and stuff about it was like more than I was willing to deal with. So it lasted 2 years. And I think it was like
Wow.
a good 2 years. Yeah.
good
I mean, I was happy it took them 2 years to like catch on.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it's like the weird thing about motorcycles too, is that like, if there had been just a car that was like not registered in the parking lot, somebody would have noticed it. Like, but like the motorcycle parked off to the side, it sort of just like evaded attention, which I think motorcycles sometimes do.
Yeah, there's different rules for motorcycles, right?
Yeah. So I was into that motorcycle for a while, and then I didn't ride for a bit. I lived in Uganda for a year when I was like right before I transitioned, and I had a really old Mitsubishi Pajero 4x4, which is like it was like a diesel. It's like the same one that was used. Basically, the UN always used Land Cruisers in most places, but for like 2 years they got in a fight with Toyota, and they bought a bunch of Mitsubishi Pajeros that were like much worse than Land Cruisers.
Okay.
And then 2 years later, they like made their deal with the Land Cruiser again, and so there were a bunch of old '80s diesel Pajeros just floating around that were like institutional cars left over from when the institutions were fighting with Toyota. And I got one of those, and it was constantly breaking. And I met these mechanics who would help me fix it. And in their shop was a Kawasaki KLR 650. And it just like, I mean, they're really big, those 650s.
Yeah, they are very physically big.
Huge. Physically, they're really big. And the mechanic was just like, yeah, I can go anywhere on this bike. Like, I can go wherever I want. And that just stuck in my head. And then I transitioned, and for a while in New York, I felt like very, very meek. Like I felt like really, people would like talk to me, and it was that period after transition. I was like, I just didn't want to talk to people on the street. I didn't like going to the store was like a whole ordeal where it was like, and how do I feel about how I look or makeup or like all those kind of things. And was like, at one day I was like, I really don't love how little like space I feel entitled to take up, like how unfree I feel, and just like the way I traverse the world. I feel so meek and so I felt fear, I felt a lot of fear when I moved around. And I just was thinking about this KLR 650 and this mechanic who's like, I just go anywhere I want to go on this 650. And I was like, I want that. Like I want that feeling of being able to go places. And I was dating this older guy at the time. I mean, I guess you could say he was my sugar daddy. Um, but I cared about him too. I mean, the relationship was definitely based on early on was like a transactional kind of thing that way. But, and he had bought a boat and he did not know how to ride this. He did not know how to drive this boat at all. He was like, always bumping into things and he was terrified of taking it out because he was going to crash it, like, into a dock, anytime he used it. And I had worked in a harbor when I was young. So I was like, I know how to ride a boat and I know how to like help you with your boat. And so, which was like the basis of our early relationship was like basically sex and driving a boat. Like,
I mean, it's
was
kind
like the
of a
two
decent
things.
deal.
It was great. It was honestly really, but he was like, oh, you're like, I'm learning a boat. Like you should learn something. And one day I was like, well, there's this KLR 650. I've been thinking about a KLR 650. And he just was like, okay. And didn't say anything about it. And I was going home from his place and I was on the train and he was like, there's one for sale in Staten Island. Go get it now and I'll buy it for you. You buy all the insurance, you buy all the stuff, I'll buy you the bike. It was like, and I was like, he mostly, I didn't know how long the offer was good for, because
Yeah.
sometimes it's like he would have an expansive mood like that and be like, I'm gonna do this for you. And then other times, you might mention like, remember when you said that? And you'd be like, no, I don't remember that. So it's like you gotta strike when the mood is expansive. So he's like, there's one in Staten Island. So I just like went, I still didn't have, license, still didn't have anything, but I just went to Staten Island. And it was brand new. It was like a year end. They were before the next year model year rolled out, and they were getting rid of the ones they had in the whatever it is, the fall, October or something like that. And so I just bought it, he with the money he gave me, and then suddenly I had this KLR 650 in New York, and it totally changed my relationship with like being on the street, because suddenly when people wanted to talk to me, they didn't want to talk to me about like whatever I was doing in terms of my presentation, whatever I was doing in terms of gender. Like they only wanted to talk about the motorcycle, They would be like, what's that bike? It's pretty big, blah, blah. And they kept on being like, is that your boyfriend's bike? And blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So then I painted it pink so that everybody would know it was my bike, like, even though that like kind of redid the whole gender thing I was trying to escape from, but whatever.
Yeah.
So I had this pink KLR 650 in New York and it was kind of like a statement piece that I feel like everybody in my neighborhood kind of got to know me as like, the trans girl on the pink KLR. And I got really into like, KLR, they have a whole kind of culture of KLR people have a culture of modding their bikes. So I got into like, making like a little dash and like learning some electronics and stuff to do some work on the bike. And I had it like basically perfect.
And then
it got stolen.
What's up with that?
Yeah.
Is that the New York way?
Yeah, basically, I think it's just really hard to hold on. And KLR 650s are popular bikes to steal. Like
pink one?
I think they just break it. I think they just take it into parts. They just and then it's sold as it do. Like that was what was so sad is like all my little careful mods were probably like chopped up into pieces and
right
put aside for the repair parts. But I mean, like there's like this super asshole motorcycle mechanic at the end of my block. He's like famously an asshole. Like if you read his like Yelp pages, it's like, I didn't know they made assholes like this still. It's
wow.
just awful. He's like a good mechanic, but terrible, terrible person to interact with. And like the first thing he said to me when he saw the bike was like, "That was a mistake. It's the most stolen bike in New York City." And I was like,
What?
"Thanks, guy." You know, but he was
Jesus.
right. He was correct. It got stolen pretty fast.
How long did
2 years.
Okay.
See,
You got a
it's
2-year rule too.
This is the 2-year
I
rule.
got 2 years out of it. Well, my Yamaha. So I had insurance on it, and I learned actually that I'm not actually likely to go all over the world on a motorcycle, like on a single motorcycle. You know, the KLR dream is actually
Mhm.
probably not my dream. You know, it's I will go places and maybe have a bike here, a bike there, but I don't think I'm going to take a single bike anywhere I need to go. And so, it's so big. Like every time you went across the Williamsburg Bridge or one of the big bridges in New York, like you just get so blown around. It just was kind of the wrong bike for New York. Like it turned out once I'd had it for a while. And yeah, someone just told me that like what is now called the MT-07, what was then the FZ-07, was like a really solid bike with like so much fun. Like enough power that you'll never get sick of it without it being like so much power that you have to like constantly be holding it back.
Mhm.
So I found a used one in Pennsylvania and used my insurance money and got that um, FCO7. Used up the last of my pink spray paint from the KLR and sort of pinked that one out too. And I've been riding. That one has not gotten stolen. I've had that one for years.
How many years?
I think I got it in 2016.
So all that said, like, do you have a dream bike? Like, if money were no option and you were, the roads were no option,
Huh.
I'm sure you probably have many.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends where I am. If I was here in Colombia, I might try for like they do import KTMs here that are like super, like the 690s or stuff like that. Like the 690, I think weighs like 350 pounds. Like 690, like R, the adventure one, it weighs like 350 pounds and has so much like handling. That always seemed really cool to me, to have like a bike that could fall over and that I wouldn't like exhaust myself picking it up if I dropped it. But yeah, I don't know. I like light, agile bikes, I think is what I'm learning about myself
Mhm.
as I go on in my motorcycle adventures.
And
Or-
specifically sporty bikes.
I
Mm.
like, yeah, I don't like I don't think I need a ton of power, but I like being able to sort of flick it around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I borrowed a Road King once, and it was super cool. Like it felt like riding on like a lazy boy recliner at 70. It was incredibly comfortable, but it it was it was like there was a part of me that's like I don't know if I would just rather have a car.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I actually have a question for you all because it is so interesting being here in Colombia with like the way that like what bikes get sold and the sort of price points around them.
Hmm.
Just the idea of like, oh, like I think the AKT I bought brand new was $1,800, and that was like a pretty nice fancy bike for Colombia, and it's because there's bikes that like in the United States people turn their nose up, like a lot of these Chinese bikes. They'll look at those bikes
Mhm.
and be like, no, I won't ride like a Chinese bike. But like here, that's not a thing. So there's all these different brands coming in from China here that are half the price of sort of like the legacy brands. Like
Mhm.
Vogue just came here. Royal Enfield, obviously from India, is here. Um, and they seem like to me like they seem like really pretty nice bikes that you can tinker on and get all the parts that you want for on like the internet or shipped or something like
Mhm.
that. And I sort of like the culture around like, yeah, like whoever makes a bike that we can make work, like we're down with it. And they won't even sell those bikes in the US.
Right.
The same friend of mine had the CB has can't remember the brand name of it because it was a Chinese like off-brand name, but it was a 200 street and trail bike that we called Putt Putt,
Hmm.
and it was an awesome little bike. Like it was so easy to work on, and so like I think it was like $2,000 like new, Like you're not afraid to like mess anything up because
Yeah.
it's not like a $20,000 like whatever. I don't know. There's just something really fun about it. Like there's something freeing about having a bike that you feel like you can just toss around, fix, and go, oh, well, I'm just going to fix that myself. Like,
Yeah.
there's, I don't know, there's something special there. Like I would definitely consider getting, like we've talked about getting dirt bikes around here because we're on the North Shore and we have a beach nearby and trails in the woods.
Yeah.
But we've never actually bit the bullet and gotten anything.
Yeah. Have you seen like they sell like these like $1,000 pit bikes on Amazon or like, wherever, like
Yeah.
that are just little dirt bikes,
Yeah.
and like you could just change out the carb if you want like a little more power or something like that. Like I think those are super cool.
Oh yeah, yeah. We can buy those at the hardware store here.
That's
Like
awesome.
you can pick up like a lawnmower, a snowblower, and like a little pit bike, and it's like fuck yeah.
Yeah.
But it is the same. Like most people will turn their nose up at it, like if they're a serious rider and like go, oh, that's for kids. That's for like a beginner bike.
Right.
But it's like fuck that. Like no, it's not.
We're always like, fuck that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it a motorcycle? Does it work? Okay, let's try it out.
Yeah. I've been like, I mean, with this AKT, like I've been just sort of like, yeah, totally. It's been making me really reevaluate my relationship to these bikes. I watched this YouTube thing too. I forgot what the name of the guy is on YouTube, but it's a guy who went all the way around the world on a Honda C90. Do you know what those are? The C90s?
Yeah, the CT.
Yeah, like the little like the scooters that
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
were
yeah.
from the 70s. He took a little 90cc scooter. He went from Alaska to Argentina, and he just like whenever something broke, he would just sort of like go to the local, bike wherever like he could find like bike parts, like find something that basically functioned, strap it to that bike, and continue on his way. Like when his suspension broke, he like took the suspension off another bike, welded it to the front of the scooter.
Yeah.
And he was like, "This is way better now." Like, and it was like, it was like this like terrible Frankenstein bike that took him all around the world. And unlike, if he was on like a BMW 1200 like adventure bike where people are like, like, this person's like doing a thing, like we're not going to talk to him. Like everybody was delighted to see him show
Yeah.
up on a scooter. It's kind of like this is similar to like our penguin pillow. Like you show up and your bike is a little funny and cutesy and like whatever, and people are like, "Oh, we want to talk." Whereas like when you show up on like a BMW, adventure bike, people are like, "This person, no, like this is not it's not like a friendly entrance." Whereas like a little 90cc like beeping a horn, like some stuffed animals on a basket on the front. Like, yeah, people want to talk. He took it off road. He took it everywhere, and it's just like he didn't worry about it. And that was like, that's what I want with a bike. It's like a bike that I don't have to be precious about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that.
I mean, this has also been like a thing where it's basically like, I think of the more I've known about bikes, the more comfortable I am. Just basically being like, I mean, they're actually not that fancy. Like it's like, here's my analogy. It's like a window, right? Like a window in a building. When you first see it, you're like, oh, that's like somebody put that together, and it's like really well made. And I can't possibly mess with that window because then the house will leak and water will get in or wind or whatever. And then eventually you figure out that like a window is just a hole in the wall, and that like any hole in the wall is a window,
Yeah.
and that like bikes are basically the same. Like I'm coming to the thing where like bikes are basically the same thing. It's like a little pot boiler and two wheels.
Yeah.
And like anything that you can kind of like stick your little gas pot on
Yeah.
and have the wheels roll, well then that's the bike,
Yeah.
and the fear, I used to have like a real big fear that like, oh, if I don't have it like checked out and pristine, like I'm taking my life into my hands every single time. And I think that's like a little bit true, but I think it's also just, you compensate and you drive for the bike that you have.
Yeah, it's also, I find, like a double edge because the more you learn about a bike and you go, oh, is it just that one tiny little bolt that holds that whole thing together? And you're like, oh, that's actually kind of terrifying. And you're like, am I the one that's tightening that bolt? Like,
Yeah.
there's two sides. I personally find a lot of comfort in that, knowing that like I
Yeah.
put it together, I know it's safe, I know it's, whatever. But also acknowledging that I can be incompetent at times and like forget things and be like,
Yeah.
shit, like this machine actually, what seemed so complicated like years ago when we started riding, now it just seems like so simple.
Do you know the origin of the phrase haywire? Like that's gone all haywire with something like that
Yeah.
phrase. The origin of that phrase is actually from like logging culture because like back in the day when loggers were like, using steam engines and blah, 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 they just used haywire to like hold everything together. Like everything was just haywired together. And so it was like, it's a haywire operation, meaning like it's just held together with haywire. And
Huh.
like the more I learn about like everything in like the material world around me, the more I'm just kind of like, oh, the world is held together by haywire. Like everywhere you go,
Yeah.
it's just like the buildings that we live in are like haywire. Like it's like this is just everything. It's some nails holding some wood together, and I like am 4 stories in the air, like trusting that these
Yeah.
nails that
Yeah.
were put in by a carpenter 100 years ago are somehow fine,
Yeah.
and it's like there's a kind of weird comfort to basically be like it's all haywire, and if it's all haywire, then maybe having a motorcycle is fine. Like you learn about the tolerances on a motorcycle, and they're like, yeah, this should be somewhere between like here, like your chain, like how tight your chain is. Like I used to always want to be like, it has to be just right, and it's like, it should be either an inch this way or an inch that way, or like if you hear it slapping, that's a problem,
Mhm.
and it's like that's so, it's so like that's haywire, like
Yeah.
just that's yeah. Does it kind of work? Okay,
It can
Yeah.
kind of work. It can also come apart at any moment. You never know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think the longer that I ride, the more, but like the wider that threshold is
The
for
more like you're more like relaxed about it.
well, like say like the chain thing. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's this little bit of tolerance for like, where it should be. Um, for me, the more I ride, that gets wider and go, I can
mhm,
allow it to be a little looser or a little
yeah,
Yeah.
tighter, or like, the brakes aren't that great, but
yeah,
they're stopping
Yeah.
ish.
Well,
Like
you like
yeah,
adjust for it. It's like
you
the
adjust
same
your riding
same thing
for
with
it.
like tire pressure. It's like, am I riding like sort of normal? Okay, great. My tires must be great. Am I riding like I'm sort of drunk? Okay, I must need some air.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can I manage it all the way to the garage? Yeah, sure I can. Whatever.
Yeah, and I'm more and more like just kind of leaning into like that attitude. Like and I feel like motorcycles actually train me to have that attitude about many things.
Mhm.
Like because I think I'm somebody who does have inclinations towards perfectionism or like anxiety or like over worrying, and
Mhm.
that training of getting on this like kind of dumb machine that probably will hold together but might not is just like a way of like having faith in the ways that we put together the world.
For instance, this time very recently where I bent a valve in the
Hmm.
Sporty, and it was my first time getting into like like engine stuff, which
Yeah,
which is still like foreign to me. I'm like, it's gonna be so crazy in there. It's
yeah,
like, these tolerances that are like millimeters. Um, and then someone told me like, you don't have to be that picky about it. Like just tighten it till it's tight and make sure everything seals up. And like the thing is like a locomotive. Like it's really simple.
hmm,
As long as there's fire and gas in that thing, you're gonna move. It's gonna be a motorcycle. And like it took
yeah,
it took that thinking to allow me to actually proceed and like
Right.
move on to actually get this bike working again. Otherwise, I would have just been like so paranoid about every little thing and like triple checking this and like, is this millimeter the right millimeter? Like,
right,
Yeah.
totally. I
but
have that all the time. Like, and it's like to just sort of be like, oh, okay, I'm gonna try and just let it go.
yeah. And once you learn that these things are, haywire, like
Yeah,
that you can accept it a little easier, right? Like that's the way it's
yeah,
supposed to be.
yeah, totally.
Any really notable motorcycle stories you want to get out there?
No, not. I mean, I feel like I don't have any like wild or crazy like motorcycle stories, mostly because I think I have a similar. It has a little bit to do with like attitude around motorcycles. It's like that I've slowly come, to find them as a as a fun way of having transport and not a thing. And so like, when I was young, like I told that story about buying the motorcycle from the cop and like what it was like to like go around the first turn on the interstate and blah blah. And like I really like made that a story. And as my attitude towards like motorcycles has changed, like my attitude towards like what a motorcycle story is has kind of changed too, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Like it isn't, it's like, I've done things like, I've ridden like the Blue Ridge Parkway and I've gone, I've gone on a couple of trips to La Guajira on the motorcycles here. And, it's cool. Like the first time you cross a stream or the first time you, drop it and you have to get it fixed in the middle of nowhere. But like also at some point that feels like I like that it becomes not grounds for like a whole narrative. It's just like, this is a part of it. And like, that's like, and that makes it kind of, like a peaceful part of life.
Do you know what fucking sucks?
What fucking sucks?
Stripped bolts.
Stripped bolts do fucking suck. What made you think of that?
I don't know. Just like, what does fucking suck? It's like, I can't believe we did not talk about it before, because a stripped bolt is like one of the most suckiest things that could ever suck about a motorcycle, especially an old like vintage bike. It's having a stripped fucking bolt.
I'm going to call you out. I know why you thought about this.
Why?
Because last night we were in bed watching some stupid car restoration show, and there was one guy who was grinding off like all the bolts, and the other guy was like, "No, we want to keep it. We want to keep it like old school.
We want to keep it original.
We want to keep it original, and we want to restore this. Don't be." And the guy was just like, "Man," just like slicing them all off.
You don't keep it original by keeping stripped bolts. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's,
but he didn't even try. But anyway, I called you out.
Yeah. I
but
forgot.
you're right.
I totally forgot about watching that last night. But yeah, that's probably where it came from.
You're right. Yeah. Did this happen to you on your bike at least once?
1,000 times.
Okay. 1,000 times.
1,000 times.
This is a thing that happens to only Harley Davidsons.
No. No. The bolts may be more expensive for Harleys, but
yeah, because they're Harley bolts.
They're Harley bolts. And like, yeah, I'm gonna get into that quickly because okay, so you're working on your bike.
Yeah.
And there are things called torque specs that try to prevent you from stripping bolts, or at least stripping like threads. That's the worst.
Yeah.
And like most people ignore them, including myself, for the most part, unless it's something like really important.
Yeah.
Like, you get the gist of it. But like you have the ratchet, crank it, then you're going like slow. You're like thinking in your head, you're like, I think this is tight enough. Just a little bit more, just a little bit snug, a little bit more, and then it spins. And you're like, motherfucker, no. And then you're like, okay, whatever. I'm an idiot. Again. I stripped another bolt. Again. Just like you said you would never do it again, but you did. You over tightened it and you stripped the threads off. So then you're like, not a big deal. I'm just going to tap and dye it or whatever and like clean up the threads and put a new bolt in or whatever. It'll be fine.
It'll be great. And
what ends up happening is a series of events. These are your options, okay? So one is like stripped bolt. It's like, okay, I got to get this bolt out. There is an easy out way to get the bolt, like a tool, an extractor. If you can get them to work, you can just drill it out and bash it with another hammer or screw or whatever. You can Dremel the head of a bolt and try to use it as a screwdriver bit. All these fucking tricks.
Yeah.
Impact hammer, whatever. All else fails. Most rednecks end up cutting them off or drilling them out, or like some like really brute way of getting a bolt out.
Yeah.
And then you fuck up the threads on the inside, and then you're like, fuck it, now I have to like drill the whole thing out and like helicoil it, which is like putting in new threads, rethreading it and getting a different bolt. Then you find out that one bolt is probably like $14 and it has to be special ordered from like, Harley Davidson or someplace.
Yeah.
Or it's like a Honda Bolt and it's actually like a weird size and an uncommon like thread count on it. Like there's common thread counts for bolts, but Honda doesn't care about those. They're like, no, we're gonna make ours with like a really big bolt with like super fine threads and thread it backwards.
Yeah.
And you're like, why? Why would you do that to me, Honda? It fucking sucks because it sucks. And it sucks because the teeniest, tiniest bolt that you strip is not a teeny tiny problem. It's a big fucking problem every single time. And it fucking sucks.
This was pretty on topic, I feel like, this conversation.
Yeah. Ow, did that just happen?
Am I the one who says, and you're listening to episode 69 of the Salting Mother Clutchers podcast? It's like, yeah, it's like,
I
oh, you
prefer
have
that.
a Honda Civic, you know?
Yeah.
There's not a big statement when you have a motorcycle. It's like, you need a reasonable form of transportation.
Stripped bolts.
Those two suck. I agree with you.
All right, end of podcast.
A Honda Shadow, and she just leaves it right on the street. And she's like, occasionally I find it like a block or two from where I left it, where people like steal it, drive it a block, and are like, nah. And it's like,
Whatever, bitch does it in one take. Okay, then.
yeah, it's anti-U.S. bias. Just cutting out your U.S. correspondent.
It's more custom.
So
That's why all stock Hondas are custom.
And then is this too long a story? I can break
No,
it
no,
up.
no.
No.
I know.
Yeah.
This is your
then I
podcast,
moved in.
Tori.
Oh, amazing.
Crank, crank, crank,
I'll
crank, crank.
ratchet your nut.
You'll ratchet my nut. I'll strip your nut.
I'll strip your nut.
So what's the
I don't know.
question?
I don't know. Do you agree? Do you also like those bikes? Or are you sort of like, no, I'm not into the bikes that you can buy on the internet?
That's poetic.
Oh, thank you. Those are some stuff like that, just because nobody wants to steal them, you know, and you can. They actually are like great in New York because you can just park them wherever you want.
Right.
Like, you know, leave the keys in, and people are like, whatever. Like, once you get like detached from like status around a motorcycle, it seems like a great way to have a motorcycle is like, here's the motorcycle that I don't have to worry. Like the major concern about a motorcycle in New York, I just don't have to worry about it. you
Right.
know?
Go
I
ahead.
love that way of doing it. No, that's like, that feels like the right relationship to bikes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I feel so seen.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like, to me, it's like, and you know, it's like, the stuff gets so like intertwined with your life when you have like a day where you're like, no real communication. You're just like, that was a chill day. That was a great day.